Speaker Milton Samudo Esquire, judges of the Court of Appeal and Supreme Court, including retired judges, the High Commissioner, Trinidad and Tobago, His Excellency Derek Murray, Mr. Donovan Walker, President of the Organization of the Caribbean Association of Attorneys, Mr. Leonard Green, President of the Advocates Association, Mr. K. Churchill Nita KC and his wife, Mrs. Angela Nita, Mr. Clyde Williams, I'm not sure if he's here, but I must acknowledge the co-founders, Mr. Clyde Williams and Mr. Keith Bishop, guests of the Norman Manley Foundation. Well, I see that I was acknowledged here as the chair of the NMLS Lecture Committee. Nonetheless, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Norman Manley Law School Distinguished Lecture for the year 2024. My name is Christina Williams. I am the chair of the Norman Manley Law School Lecture Committee and a secondary student at this distinguished institution. And I'm really happy to be here hosting this event and to have you join us for this occasion. The Norman Manley Lecture is an annual event hosted in honor of the Right Excellent Norman Washington Manley, a distinguished lawyer, advocate, and national hero of Jamaica. The lecture series started in the year 1995-1996 under the co-chairmanship of Clyde Williams and Keith Bishop, who were students at the time. The objective remains constant: to be a student-led initiative that provides a public forum for commentary and discussion on topical issues in society and the practice of law. The aim of the event is to engage students, members of the legal fraternity, and a wider community on the issue chosen. This year, we chose Sports and the Law, Implications for the Economic Landscape, which will be delivered by Milton Samudo Esquire. We felt this topic was ideal, considering the imminent Olympics and the ongoing fraught discussions about sports and its economics in the media. We also considered general feedback about the concerning obscurity of sports, especially in a country like Jamaica, where sports is an entrenched part of our culture. This evening, we hope you will be informed, engaged, and may I say energized, as we plan to have a very informative discussion. We'll also have a small fireside chat with our guest speaker, and we'll also have questions from the audience. At this time, I'll invite Principal Aina to bring greetings on behalf of the Norman Manley Law School. Please make her welcome.
Our guest speaker, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and is it student or students? This is very much a student's enterprise, a tradition that started, as you heard, many years ago, for students to really understand the legacy of the great Norman Washington Manley, our national hero. Unfortunately, it ran very late this year. And as I said earlier, when students finish with exams, they finish with the law school. And so we're very delighted that what we have, and the idea is that students will get to network with practitioners. But this year, Ms. Williams and a few others are here. I have a little PowerPoint because usually it's a time for us to just look back a little bit at the year. And can I have the clicker, please? Why are you holding on to it so tight? So we started the year, and it's been a very, very busy year. We started the year in September because this is the law school's 50th anniversary. 50 years is indeed a milestone, a golden anniversary, and one which we should really celebrate. So we began in September with a distinguished lecture, which is held in honor of Dr. Barnett, who was here earlier. And in fact, we have the unveiling of the 50th anniversary logo and banner And we had that done by a student and Dr. Barnett, really to reflect the past and look to the future. And so that was our first event for the year. And so 50th anniversary celebrations have gone on all year. We then had a church service, and our alumni singers, which you will see include judges, academics, practitioners. We have our own choir director. We have our own minister. We don't need to hire anybody for anything when we have an event at the law school. We have our own dancers. And in fact, we celebrated with the class of 1998 who were celebrating their 25th anniversary, and several of whom are actually on the staff of the Norman Manley Law School now. We also celebrated our retirees. We had a number of people retiring from the law school. Mr. Robert Fletcher, Mrs. Audrey Wells, Mrs. Natalie Farrell Ross, Mr. Walker, Ms. Smith, and so we had a celebration with our retirees. We also held an event for our first-year students who received prizes at graduation. We want our students to really aim for excellence, and so we celebrate them every time we have the opportunity to do so. So those were the first-year students who received prizes and awards, usually given by members of the profession, and we thank you. All of those sitting here today who are donors and who make the journey memorable for our students, continue to donate. We also had a football match and a wellness day, can you believe, against Jambar, and the Norman Manley Law School and Jambar won. I don't know whether we put too many staff members on the team, because my thought was that we had nimble legs with the students, but Jambar won the competition. But the students have said, we will see you next year. The Wellness Day continued, and I'm particularly pleased to put up this slide with Miss Beverly Phillips in it, because Miss Phillips, although retired as assistant registrar from the law school for many years, continues to be an unpaid member of the staff. She continues to gather prizes and donations. She continues to ensure that this lecture, she's a member of the Norman Manley Foundation, she continues to ensure that this lecture is not missed in our calendar. Thank you very much, Ms. Phillips. The students held their wine and cheese, and you would have seen our host. In fact, she won the Legacy Award, which is given in memoriam of Princess Diana, for a young person who received the highest honor globally for their social action. So let us congratulate our several competitions that students entered. Caribbean Court of Justice, which we didn't win, although I heard we should have won. I don't like saying that. Margaret Fort, which we lost by 1 point. 1 point. And Lexis Caribbean, and of course, the students who went out on the ACLI, of which you are also a member. But on the international, and don't mind the end that's missing, mooting stage, we did extremely well. We won the local mooting. Is Dr. Ali still here? No, I think she's left. But we won against Mona Law, based on our our achievements over the year in Jessup. We were allowed to bring a second team from Jamaica. So Mona Law actually was able to enter the competition, and the students did well across the board in all the competitions. And just a few moments ago, we hosted this function, and I see Justice Winston Anderson has stayed with us, perhaps because he had such a good time at the first function. But honoring this publication that was really completed by the Caribbean Court of Justice, honoring legendary legal practitioners, 48 of them. And I am biased when I single out 2 of them, which are graduates of the Norman Manley Law School, the late Justice Dennis Morrison and Miss Joyce Kentish. And of course, Norman Manley, in whose name we have this lecture. And so we are very, very proud. Of course, there are many who are significantly involved with the school. We will wind up the celebrations of the 50th with a publication. This was our publication in the 40th year, The Journey. And we're going to continue the journey to 50 milestones. Many of the firms have bought ads in the magazines, and we look forward to you supporting the magazine. It really continues from 2013 to the students who graduated last year. So again, looking back on the last 10 years. And finally, they have me up here as a PR lady, our 50th anniversary gala, which will be held on June 15th. We had a series called 50 Weeks to 50 Years, where we honored a student from each year. And really it was remarkable, because when you listen to each of the graduates explain what law meant to them, why they became involved, why they became a lawyer, what law school meant to them, the friendships and the bonds they formed at law school. It's on YouTube under the Norman Manley Law School. Anytime you were just scrolling and you really want to watch something worthwhile, go to the YouTube channel, Norman Manley Law School, and watch that. One that particularly resonated with me was one given by Justice Marva McDonald Bishop, a young girl from St. Mary, who she said she became interested in law because her uncle was charged with murder. And here she was a young girl, and she just remembers weeping and weeping and weeping. And from rural Jamaica, not ever believing she would be a lawyer, but it propelled her so much that she became a lawyer. She married a lawyer, and she has 3 children who are lawyers. That's the impact of the Norman Manley Law School. So I want to thank you all for coming. I want to hand over to Ms. Williams to marshal the evening for us, and to remember that one of the things that Norman Washington Manley is known for is institution building. Institution building. And building this institution and continuing to give back and support with your time, your talent, and your tithe. We look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Principal Aino. At this time, I will invite Ms. Beverly Phillips, JP, Executive Member of the Norman Manley Foundation, to bring greetings on behalf of the Norman Manley Foundation. Please make her welcome.
Our host, Norman Manley Law School, Ms. Carol Aina, CD, Senior Tutor, Norman Manley Law School, Ms. Greenaway, Co-Chairman, Ms. Christina Sandy Williams, Guest Speaker, Mr. Milton Samuda, Esquire, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. As an executive member of the Norman Manley Foundation, I bring greetings on behalf of the chairman of the Norman Manley Foundation, Mr. Ainsley C. Henriquez, CD, who is ill and is disappointed that he cannot be at this function this evening. It is noteworthy that Mr. Henriquez has never missed a Norman Manley lecture since its founding in 1995, and he has given the reflections on 2 occasions. I view this task as a privilege, firstly, as I have been associated with the Norman Manley Lecture Committee as its staff advisor from 1995 to 2022, and secondly, that the Manley and the Phillips families have been closely associated for 5 generations of both families in some instances. On behalf of the chairman of the foundation, I wish this evening's proceedings well, and we look forward to the celebration, big celebration, the 30th anniversary of the Norman Manley Lecture Committee Series with you all next year, God's willing. Thank you very much.
I just want to repeat that. Big celebrations next year. So everyone here should be present along with a few others. Yes, Principal Lino? So I hope I'll be here as an alumni. Yes, an alumnus. That's very important to me as a secondary student. All right, so we have present with us Mr. Churchill Nita Casey, but we will have him on screen as well, as we'll be playing a video reflection on the Right Excellent Honorable Norman Manley. Are we ready? Please enjoy.
Quote in 1912, in the last 3 years at Jamaica College, his achievements are well known. In 1910, Norman Manley was made captain of the track team that lost the cup in 1910 and led them to victory in 2 consecutive years. In 1912, Norman Manley established a record at Savannah Park in 100 yards of 10 seconds, which lasted until 1952. When he became captain of the track team, he undertook the responsibility of coaching the boys himself. So he'd get up in the morning and coach them. In 1912, he was made captain of the Sunlight Cup team. And when he realized that there was no fast bowler on the team, he got up in the morning, made himself into a fast bowler, and took most wickets in Sunlight. The transformation came largely as a result of Norman Manley's own determination result. His iron discipline, his capacity for sustained work, his fixity of purpose, and his sustained pursuit of excellence. After all of those achievements as a schoolboy, in 1914, he won the Rhodes Scholarship. And within 1 month, he was struck down by typhoid fever, and his weight fell from 175 pounds to 94 pounds. He recovered and went to Oxford. And after the first term, he volunteered for the First World War. Norman Manley spent 4 years in the First World War. He was a gunner. He had wanted to become a pilot, but could not afford the fee. It was only 150 pounds. So he became a gunner. And that involved being exposed to the hazards and danger of trench warfare, because he had to set the guns. When Norman Manley came out of the First World War, he got the military medal, which is a medal from Great Britain. He re-entered Oxford. He had a nervous breakdown, recovered, went back to Oxford, and he did the BCMs, the Bachelor of Civil Laws. It is a course that should last for 2 years, and he did it in 6 months and got first class honors. He also got first class honors at the bar. And Vivian Blake, one of his proteges and one of Jamaica's finest advocates, in a lecture he gave in 1984, said that in conversation with Norman Manley, that Manley told him that he knew the decision in over 1,000 reported cases in various branches of the law that he could decide on Manley. Norman Manley was called to the bar in Jamaica in 1922, August. In fact, no lawyer had been enrolled in Jamaica since 1911. He was invited to take civic in 1932, and 2 months less than the 10 years. Understand? Because what had happened, at first, he found the going difficult. His first case was actually in November of that year in Spanish Town. And he would write, I knew every line and letter of the evidence by heart. I had cross-examined on paper every witness. I filled over 3 volumes of notebooks. Yet when he stood up to ask his first question, he froze. And he was there, his palms got sweaty and his throat dry. And after a minute, a months of auto-suggestion came into play. And he asked his first question. Then after he said he was on his way. He of course won that case. Everybody deferred to Norman Manley. He was so outstanding. All of the others were dwarfed by his presence. The verdict given by those judges who witnessed his courtroom style and experienced his advocacy skill is sufficient to validate the claim that for eloquence, style and effectiveness in cross-examination and depth of preparation has not been equaled by any member of the Jamaican bar. But one of the cases I think that demonstrated the extent of Norman Manley's preparation and the commitment and the energy is the case of Mrs. Alexander. She was charged along with her brother. It's in 1931 for the murder of her husband. At the end of the case, Justice Adrian Clark said, if genius is an infinite capacity for taking place, you have been defended by a genius. When Norman Manley was being interviewed by Philip Sherlock, one of his biographers, and he was asked the reason for his success.
Absolutely egotistic determination to win every case I was engaged in, which I regard as the most important attribute of an advocate.
Maximum concentration, maximum study, maximum observation, maximum everything. That is what differentiated him from the others. Norman had incredible endurance. He would routinely work 15 hours a day. Right? He would schedule meetings with his solicitors. They were, before they went there, got a call and said, come to John Blair at 12 o'clock. It is midnight. That is after Norman Manley had done preparation for his case. Right? And then leaves the Supreme Court or wherever and goes on campaigns and gives speeches, comes back home to John Blair by 11 o'clock. And then he has a conference at 12, and that will last until 3 o'clock or so in the morning. And I went down a solicitor who used to instruct him, a very popular solicitor in St. Mary. I went down and the firm still exists. I said on one occasion that after they had finished a conference at 3 o'clock, Manley said that he was going to read his brief for a case that he was doing in Manley that day. I met him in 1961, I think. That's when he came to England to address the students, right, at the student center. And he spoke about his plans for federation. Norman Washington Manley said that the best way to obtain independence was if there was a federation of the territories, the British territories. Right? There was actually a federal parliament at one time. Right? Now, because of its commitment to democracy, I must tell you all the same that in 1950, the PNP won the first election in 55 and in 1959. Understand? But because of his commitment to democracy, he put it to the people and had a referendum. The people voted against it. And he demonstrated his commitment to them democracy and called in a general election. That was, and we still had 2 or 3 years to run before election was constitutionally due. We not only demonstrated his commitment to us, but a sense of principle. As a person, he had an iron-clad integrity. After they voted against federation, he continued with characteristic vigor and energy his pursuit of independence, right? Because he was the doyen and the architect and builder of independence. Is that by a cold twist of fate, as you know, he was not in power when we got independence. When Norman Manley died on the 2nd of September, 1969, on the 3rd of September, the Gleaner wrote this. Norman Manley was in every sense a great man. His greatness was no mere insular magnificence. He had the mind and measure of the great everywhere, whether in things of law, in the arts of life, in public dedication, and family devotion. He was a genius of total and unselfish commitment. And Victor Stafford Reed, who was an author, novelist, and later a mighty biographer, wrote, in the larger canvas, he was always lawyer, athlete, war hero, statesman. But in the minor canvas, more true. Teacher, farmer, expert axeman, lover of the arts, a drum fire performance on his way. When Norman Manley was announced that he made a national hero at the Foundation Law School, yes, it was well received. I believe it was an approbation because Norman Manley had captivated the attention, the imagination and of the Jamaica and had inspired men. When he gave his final speech at the KNP conference in 1969, he said, my mission of my generation was to achieve self-government, to win self-government, and to win political independence for the black masses of this country, of which I sprung, from which I sprung. And I can say proudly and happily today, mission achieved. The law school was a very significant development. A lot of people have made law a profession, not only for itself, but as a stepping stone to others. thing. And they could not be named after anybody else. But no, I wasn't a leader of men, a statesman, an intellectual giant, a visionary, a patriot, father of the nation.
I've had to watch that video a few times in preparation for this evening, and every single time I watch it, I get chills. Did you get chills too? Yes. Mind and measure of the greatest everywhere. Genius of total and unselfish commitment. Another round of applause. I also want to thank again Mr. Churchill Nita Casey for that reflection. For our lecture this evening, we have Milton Jefferson Samuda Esquire. He holds a Bachelor of Laws from the University of the West Indies and a legal education certificate from the Norman Manley Law School. He was admitted to the bar in Jamaica in 1982 and the British Virgin Islands in 1993. He's the managing partner of Samuda & Johnson, heads the firm's commercial department, and is a member of the Jamaican Bar Association. Mr. Samuda's practice includes tourism, corporate and hotel financing, trade and transportation, mining and energy, sports and entertainment, and maritime law. Yes, very well rounded. In his corporate practice, in addition to representing international and local financiers in major lendings for a variety of projects, Mr. Samuda has acted as corporate secretary to private companies, unincorporated associations, and charitable foundations. Between 1993 and 1995, Mr. Samuda lived and practiced in the British Virgin Islands, acquiring particular expertise in the use of offshore vehicles in tax and estate planning for private and business interests. From 2007 to 2011, he served on the government's International Finance Services Center Advisory Committee, which was established to advise the Minister of Finance on establishing an IFSC in Jamaica. Mr. Samuda is a director of Everydata Jamaica Limited, formerly Credit Info Jamaica Limited, Jamaica's first licensed credit bureau, and is a former director of Credit Advice Barbados, Barbados' leading credit bureau. Mr. Samuda is a distinguished past president of the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce, a past chairman of Jamaica Promotions Corporation's JAMPRO, chairman of the Institute of Law and Economics, chairman of the National Dance Theatre Company, so I'm one of the arts as well, chairman of Brescia Limited, chairman of the Berger Paints Jamaica Limited Pension Fund, a director of Berger Paints Jamaica Limited, which is a public listed company, and a director of both VM Building Society, VM Wealth Management Limited, and its parent, VM Investments Limited, also a publicly listed company. Mr. Samuda is a director of the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance and a member of the advisory board of the Spanish Jamaican Foundation, which was actually conceptualized by him and established by Spanish investors here in Jamaica. He also served as the foundation secretary. Mr. Samuda also serves as chairman of the Wolmer's Trust. Anyone here from Wolmer's? And is a former chairman of the Board of Management of the Wolmer's Trust Schools. He's also a member of the Finance and General Purposes Committee of the University of the West Indies. Not sure if you were there when I was the president, sir. And of the country nominating committee for Jamaica of the Anthony N. Sabga Caribbean Awards for Excellence. To summarize all that, this is how I describe Mr. Samuda. He's a distinguished lawyer, outstanding private sector leader, dedicated volunteer, accomplished civil society leader, and also a happily family man. He's married to Elizabeth and has 3 children, Matthew, Marlon, and Mariana. Ladies and gentlemen, please make Mr. Milton Jefferson Samuda Esquire welcome.
You know, one of the things I suppose it comes with the territory listening to yourself being introduced and wondering, where the hell do I find the time? You know, but you will notice that a lot of the things are preceded by the only four-letter word that I welcome in description of myself, and that is P-A-S-T. So good evening, everybody. I'm reminded listening of a function I attended. I think it was when I was president of the chamber. And I got the list of distinguished guests that I should go through. And I remember the young lady who had been asked to introduce me. And after she said, Madame, because it was a female, Master of Ceremonies, she turned and she said, and all the people them she did say. That was her translation of all protocols having been observed. So all protocols having been observed, good evening. Let me start from the outset by thanking especially Kerry, I don't know if she's in the audience, for the wonderful assistance in getting everything together for today. And although I will probably embarrass her and she will never forgive me, I am going to single out and thank my niece. She's already looking up there, Alison Samuda, who is at the law school and who helped with the presentation. When I was preparing, I said, you know, I am triply honored. The first time I said doubly honored to give this presentation, because it's the second time for me having given the presentation in 2017. It is the 50th anniversary, so that's triple. But then I came early, as I tend to do, and I saw that. And so now I'm quadruply honored. Because to follow a presentation to such eminence, and including my good friend Hilary Phillips, and all the others I can consider friends, really makes me feel special. So thank you very much to this Law School Students Association, to the principal, and all those who conspired to have me back here. I shall punish you properly by the length of my presentation. So Manley and sport. I want to give you some context. Context is always important. Norman Manley's life was focused on nation building, and as you heard, on political independence. Yet at the heart of it was a philosophy of service. And enmeshed in that was a search for and a drive for liberation and identity. His life was reflective of an appreciation for sport and its wholesome effect on the human spirit. That spirit which is infused in all of us by the divine. And he saw how sport could help to better even that. And his wasn't a theoretic appreciation, it was experiential. His whole life had been about sport. And as you heard, he excelled at absolutely everything. He founded the Jamaica Amateur Athletic Association, the Jamaica Boxing Board of Control, and you heard Churchill speak about him as an institution builder. The Amateur Swimming Association, the Jamaica Olympic Association. He was a steward of the Jockey Club, and he was a judge of athletic meets. And as head of government, he's the one who championed the building of the National Stadium. You also heard from Churchill that he had set a record in the 100-meter dash. Listen to what you can read on the Michael Manley Foundation website. And I quote, Douglas Manley of Monroe College distinguished himself in the 1941 annual secondary boys' schools track and field championships, equaling the then 30-year-old record that his father had held over the 100-yard dash, and leaving in his wake two legendary schoolboy sprinters, Leroy Coker Brown of Woolmer's. Happy Woolmer's Day. And we will not guess who the second one was. Somebody said it. Herb McKinley of Calabar High School. So Douglas Manley had defeated Herb McKinley and equaled his father's record. Manley trained boxers. Edna Manley trained horses. They even had out of their stable a champion. I think it was in the welterweight division, but we can check that, Churchill. So that was what he experienced, that was what he knew, that is what he participated in. So that is the context in which I want to place what it is that we're going to discuss. And to look at this history that brought with it inspiration, liberation, and identity. And if we examine the history of our Caribbean people, our Caribbean civilization, it is a story of inspiration, liberation, and a search for identity. James Ferguson tells us in his article, Historic Gold, the earliest Caribbean Olympic heroes, published for Caribbean Beat, that it all started when 17-year-old Cuban fencer by the name of Ramon Fox surprised Louis Perry to take the gold medal in the Ippy at the Paris Olympics in 1900. Ramon repeated in 1904, winning both the Ippy and the foil, and then won gold at the 1938 Central American and Caribbean Games at the ripe old age of 55. In Amsterdam in 1928, Haiti's Silvio Cato took silver, appropriately Silvio Cato, in the long jump, and later broke the world record with a leap of 7.93 meters, which certainly up until I think it was 2021 was still the record in Haiti. Unfortunately, after that, his career went downhill. He became a politician. And he was elected mayor of Port-au-Prince in 1946, and the multi-purpose stadium in that city is named for him. But then came Witt, Roden, McKinley, Lang, who covered Jamaica and the Caribbean, both in 1948 and 1952 Olympics, with glory, laying the foundation for a legacy that continues this day. Donald Quarry, Merlene Ottey, Hazley Crawford, Atta Bolden, Veronica Campbell Brown, Kirani James, Elaine Thompson Hero, Shelley Ann Fraser Price, and of course, the legendary Dr. the Honorable Ambassador Usain St. Leopold. That is what happens when there is inspiration as part of a process of liberation and the continuing actualization of identity. However, whereas those notable achievements did inspire us, perhaps nothing spoke more to the process of liberation and identity. The emergence of self-belief than the collective achievement of the West Indies, beating the colonial masters at their own game and securing the first ever test victory in February of 1930 with the legendary George Headley. Here now, on full display, was what we have been speaking about. Sport, inspiring people, people separated by water, aiding their continuing liberation and molding their sense of identity, emerging as nations. Sport became an essential ingredient of our psychological emergence from colonialism. And with our music, mento, calypso, ska, rocksteady, reggae, soca, dancehall, fueled by our exquisite cuisine, laid the foundation for much of what has become known as our Caribbean brand, certainly in the case of Brand Jamaica. But lest we forget that we're not islands and territories for Ghana unto ourselves. Lest we think that our experience is unique or narrowly national or Caribbean. Consider the impact of Muhammad Ali on the American psyche and world sentiment. Consider the upending of the then International Sports Administration and changing of the race dialogue brought by Jesse James, Tommy Smith, and John Carlos. Their individual actions, not selfish, but individual actions, were catalytic of that inspiration and liberation and self-identity of which I speak. And they were central to that combined intent of the international, not just Caribbean struggle, the international struggle for equality by people of color. And I ask you, while we're considering context, always considering context, to consider the geopolitics of the Berlin Games, the Munich massacre, the Montreal boycott, and the Moscow boycott. In each case, the Olympics, arguably the major sporting games of our lifetime, was used as a platform for articulating propaganda, protest, ideas, demands, with millions of eyes watching, ears listening, because in those days, remember, people are huddled around the radio, waiting for the news. There's this wonderful film clip of a family gathered around the radio, listening, hoping, willing for the brown bomber to win. And it was immortalized on canvas. That's what sports can do. So, now ladies and gentlemen, those actions, we can put them up and we can look back at them and we can say to the next generation, this is what inspired us and can continue to inspire you. But what do they really say about the topic we have under discussion today? I submit to you that they demonstrate and even foreshadow the growth of sport as a platform of messaging. And integral to that platform would be the concept of entertainment, and you will hear that word quite a bit as I proceed. So with that introduction, I just want to center our thoughts for the next hour or so. Okay, good, you're listening. On the brief that was given to me, which, as the principal indicated, was sport and the law, but also looking at the implications, economic implications arising therefrom. And Oxford describes or defines sport thus: an activity involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment. There's that word again. So that gives us some clarity on where we're going and what we might then describe as the entertainment or the sports industry. And I say entertainment because that is what provides both the foundation and the drive for a growing, multifaceted, commercial, and highly lucrative industry. But that, as the principal indicated, I must set against the background of the economic landscape. And we realize, obviously, that the sport industry does not operate in a vacuum. It doesn't live by itself. The economic landscape is critical. As of now, the majority of Caribbean economies are on the rebound. Thus says the Director of Economics at the Caribbean Development Bank, Mr. Ian Durant. Speaking at the bank's news conference on February 2024, the bank's chief economist said, and I quote, CDB forecasts an average growth rate of 8.6% for its 19 borrowing countries in 2024, largely attributable to the increased oil production in Ghana and the continued expansion of the tourism industry. Excluding Ghana, this growth projection falls to 2.3%, a moderation from the estimated growth of 2.5% in 2023, which aligns with the broader trends of slowing economy, below average global rate, and the ongoing normalization of economic conditions in the Caribbean. End of quote. So broadly speaking, ladies and gentlemen, that is the landscape, the background against which I've been asked to paint sport and the law, and to examine the potential impact of sport on that landscape. So we think now, what could possibly be that impact? What is the global value of the sports industry? There's no definitive standard by which that value is calculated. But there are some interesting indicators of just what it is that we are discussing. Prompted Research valued in 2015 the global industry at $1.5 trillion. Now remember, this is 2015. Of that amount, the USA accounted for just under 500 billion. Additionally, a study in 2014 by A.T. Kearney found the market for sport events, that's revenues from tickets, media, sport events, sponsorships, and so on, was close to $80 billion. Moreover, the sport industry is said to generate as much as 700 billion annually, or 1% of global GDP. And this is if you add sporting goods, apparel, equipment, and health and fitness to the spending. Those are large numbers. And again, remember this research, I was able to find the updated. We're talking about 2015, 2016, 2017. And that does not include the value of amateur sports. And now remember, the definition of amateur is very blurred now. We know that all our sporting icons have come from that amateur status. And it is the crucible after all in which their talents are honed, skill is developed, and very importantly, character forged. We think of champs, and we know what is entailed in that. And whilst amateur sport is seen in many quarters as sort of the most, I suppose I could say, pure form of sport, because people are doing it for the love of the game and not for money. Even that is under threat. If you look at the collegiate scene in the USA and what is happening there, and if you look at what is happening here, where even at the schoolgirl level, let us just say innovative ways have been found to encourage parents to enroll students at certain places. In many ways, our high school sport is heading in the same direction, and I think a lot of you will remember it would have been about 2015 with the issue of Michael O'Hara. Do you remember that? He had to upend his relationship with Digicel before he was allowed to compete at the Bentley's. Not sure that would happen now. So let's now look, having painted what the global industry looks like, having looked at the money that might be involved, what does that mean for our Caribbean? Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to find any credible measurement of the size of Caribbean sport. But the industry does get some attention in a UWI paper. I'm sorry I can't indicate the author, because the source from which I obtained it online identifies it as UWI but doesn't attribute the author. So my apologies for that. But let me quote, and there is this chart I want you to keep looking at. There is a paucity of data on the value of the sports industry in the Caribbean, says the paper. For the Latin American region, SportCall valued sports at $4.6 billion in 2013, or 6% of the global sports market. The figure for the Caribbean is not known, but could be somewhere less than 1%. Caribbean countries have produced world-class sporting talent, which far exceeds their small physical and economic sizes. The Caribbean can compete on the world stage in a number of sports, including track and field, cricket, swimming, etc. Now, just look at this chart. It has the results of the medal tallies for Rio. And it is using two key metrics: medals to GDP and medals to population ratio. I don't know if you can see, but look at Jamaica. Very interesting. Eh? Look at Cuba. Right. Look at the Bahamas. We say glibly a lot of the time that we punch above our weight. There's empiricism behind that claim, ladies and gentlemen. And we do ourselves a disservice when we don't, and forgive me for digressing, when we don't apply science and academic learning to other areas of our life, where we divorce business from sport, where we divorce business from music. There is a sense in which, when you look at this, you understand the measure of the achievement. But if you were able to put empiricism behind the lack of resources, this would be even the more remarkable. Another digression, when Johnson came out here to find out how it is that Jamaica is doing all of this, because from then, his record was under threat, and he knew it. One of the things that he didn't comment on camera, but I understand he said, when he saw the facilities in which our athletes train and compared them to the facilities in America, he said, oh, there are fields on which our children perform that have potholes, nicely grassed but potholes, where an ankle could derail a career. This, especially if you look at the Bahamas, is a remarkable achievement. But I know Alison wants me to get back to my script, so let me hurry up. What is not in dispute, therefore, is that we're dealing with a multi-billion-dollar international industry. And as countries who are by large, small island developing states, we have to find a way to get our unfair share of the action. So now we support and the law. And forgive me, I am from the old school. I knew sport as a collective now. So you'll hardly hear me say sports. Sport and the law. It came out up there as sports because I didn't prepare the slide. I listened to it. It was done at my office, but never mind. So let me remind you of the definition of sport, you remember, from Oxford, and highlight the word entertainment, which I said I would keep coming back to, and I'm back at it again. So the law, ever responsive to the pushing and shoving of man's life, is unfolding its own response to the phenomenon of sport as organized entertainment. Contracts have been developed to deal with both the most simple and the most complex matters. From a parental waiver at the primary school level to the sale of broadcast rights for major events. And that sale could be to multiple persons in multiple jurisdictions and covering different aspects of the sale. Administrative guidelines have been crafted for the management of competitions and events. Subsidiary legislation and codes of conduct have been agreed to enforce sportsmanship, ensure integrity, and to prevent cheating. Statute law and case law have emerged to protect the rights of athletes and ensure that they literally own their faces and a piece of their action. The sports industry's impact and influence on other major industries is clear. But sports law is now also having an impact on administrative law, media law, contract law, the law of human rights, the law of tort, and so on. So let's look at a few examples from overseas, and I'll try to be quick. In the United States and Haiti, the United States District Court, Eastern District of New York, grappled with several issues, including conflict of laws concerning matters arising from the United States crackdown on corruption in FIFA and related sports bodies, amidst the various deals and bribes which form part of the running of those organizations. Several members of CONCACAF and FIFA and other bodies pled guilty to charges including wire fraud, racketeering, and money laundering. Several pleaded not guilty, and even now some of those matters remain sub judice. Then we have the National Hockey League Players Association and the concussion injury litigation. In that case, the United States District Court for Minnesota had before it a class action suit by former NHL players. The plaintiffs generally alleged that the NHL failed to warn its players of the short and long-term effects of repeated concussions and head trauma, failed to adequately care for its players after they received such injuries, and promoted and glorified unreasonable and unnecessary violence to head trauma. The motions to dismiss by the league all failed, and the suit was eventually settled for $765 million. Then we go to Claudia Peshin and the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which we refer to as CAS. Claudia challenged the autonomy and supremacy of the court. The challenge was unsuccessful. In a decision on June 7, 2016, the German Federal Court of Justice, Germany's highest civil court, held that CAS was genuinely a court of arbitration, and in fact, was the highest sports tribunal. Can you imagine if the decision had been otherwise, given all of the decisions that CAS had made in the past? Then we go to Duty Chan and the Athletics Federation of India. Ms. Chan won India's sprint title in 2013, but was subsequently permanently banned from competition. She was told that she would not compete as a woman unless she took medical steps to alter her naturally occurring testosterone level. The International Association of Athletics Federation, as it then was, ruled that she had failed a gender verification test because her natural testosterone level had been ruled too high for her to be considered a woman. Ms. Chan protested and filed a claim before CAS. The panel agreed with her arguments and suspended for 2 years the IAAF policy requiring women to undergo hormone therapy or surgery. This ruling by precedent assured that Caster Semenya could participate in the Rio Olympics, where, as we all know, she won the gold medal in the women's 800-meter final. Finally, I want to just take a look at BPJ and West Virginia Board of Education et al. BPJ, a minor, hence the use of the initials, by her next friend and mother, Heather Jackson, sued the West Virginia State Board of Education and the state of West Virginia. She lost at first instance. On appeal, the United States Court of Appeal for the Fourth Circuit determined that, firstly, the West Virginia statute, HB 3293, passed in 2021, violated the Equal Protection Clause. because it categorically excluded transgender girls like BPJ from participating on certain school-sponsored athletic teams designated for women and girls, not substantially related to the state's assertive interest in ensuring safety and equal opportunity. It also found that that statute, HB 3293, which had, as I said, been passed in 2021, and which categorically bans transgender women and girls from participating on certain school-sponsored athletic teams designated for women and girls, violates Title IX. Title IX is a landmark federal civil rights law, which was enacted as part of the Education Amendments in 1972. And it prohibits sex-based discrimination in any school or any other education that receives funding from the federal government. 5 cases, 5 very different cases. Not your usual IP or doping cases which people habitually and usually associate with sport. 5 of the many and emerging examples of the law responding in real time to the push and pull of the realities of the international sports industry. Responding to human rights issues, issues of fairness, claims of discrimination, and the need to recognize and enforce competing rights in one industry. So why, you might ask, why does this man keep going back to the word entertainment and then again? And it is because I want to submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that there's a fairly obvious answer. If you have an industry that is now probably worth in excess of 2.5, not 1.5, 2.5 trillion, then it makes it imperative that the law be used to prevent corruption, prevent exploitation, protect anti-doping institutions, and ensure a fair and level playing field. 5 different cases. 5 cases which also reflect the natural tension. It's not an unnatural tension. The natural tension between individual rights, the rights of organizations, the struggle for integrity in sport, and that struggle is what Lord Poe has referred to recently as the struggle for the soul of sport. So that takes us now to anti-doping. And in the fighting for the soul of sport, we come face to face with what is probably its most clear and present danger. There was a systematic approach taken by several countries. This is after decades of what was known to be abuse by certain athletes, and you could say certain countries as well, and trying to right it. And because of that, in 1999, WADA emerged, and WADA, as you know, is the World Anti-Doping Agency. Now, WADA developed a code, and that code has been adopted by Jamaica and the Caribbean. I put it that way because Jamaica has its own separate regime. But as I understand it, the Eastern Caribbean is organized through the Caribbean Regional Anti-Doping Organization, which is based in Barbados. And in adopting the code, and in fact in adapting it, Jamaica and the Caribbean have fashioned their own rules. In fact, in January of this year, I didn't get the date, but in January of this year, while the World Anti-Doping Agency President Whitwell Bangkok was in Kingston, the Caribbean governments, in sort of a reaffirmation, signed an anti-doping declaration. In several of the countries, legislation similar to what obtains in Jamaica's Anti-Doping in Sport Act has been passed. These laws are the municipal law, which reflects the international anti-doping agreements and efforts by which our countries have agreed to them. The laws provide for speedy cases, quick appeals, and early determinations. And this is not anti-justice. You know, we have been coming to grips with that, especially in Jamaica. Speed doesn't ipso facto defeat justice. Efficiency doesn't ipso facto defeat justice. Right? And this has been so because of the short windows that athletes have. If something arises now, the Olympics is in July, August. So there's a necessity for this type of regime. Now, if there's an appeal in respect of an international event or a case involving an international athlete on Caribbean soil, the decision may not go on appeal to the local appeal panel, but it can go directly to CAS. And the interesting thing, I don't know if you have been following it, that has developed arising out of the anti-doping debate, if you want to call it that, is the enhanced games. I found it very interesting, let me use that word, that with the monumental and expensive and extensive and interconnected international regime, there should now emerge at this time an initiative which is the very antithesis of that, and it is the enhanced games. Announced last year and scheduled for 2025, this is the games where no athlete will be subject to drug testing. Conceived and organized by Australian entrepreneur Aaron D'Souza, the enhanced games appear set to go ahead despite much negative reaction from the established sporting bodies. The games will allow the use of performance-enhancing drugs. It will completely put aside WADA regime. It will allow prosthetic limbs, and it will also allow shoe technology. It will not be mandatory for participants to use performance-enhancing drugs, but for insurance reasons only, and I found it interesting that they made this admission, only for insurance reasons, they're only going to allow FDA-approved substances. And if you think about it from the legal point of view, that is to blunt claims, because it wouldn't be sufficient for Valentine, you know? So it will be FDA-approved substances. Initially, the games will include only track and field, swimming, weightlifting, gymnastics, and combat sports. But it is expected that that menu will, in time, expand. And D'Souza had a lot of interesting things to say about, as you can imagine, WADA. But I found what he said about the IOC particularly interesting. He described it as a corrupt and greedy organization. And he said he wants to eradicate WADA, which he calls an anti-science police force for the IOC. He also argues that the Olympic system doesn't pay athletes enough. I haven't seen him respond to Lord Cole's initiative. I have not been able to find that response. But in searching for his response, I came across something that I must absolutely share with you. And it was the headline, of an article in the UK Guardian responding to the advent of the enhanced games. And it said, "On your marks, get set, dope." Welcome to the enhanced games, the sporting event no one wants. I just found that great. Anyway, let's move on to intellectual property because I know I have to watch my time. Intellectual property is just central, just absolutely central to the international sporting industry and the monetizing of it. There are those, some sitting among us, and I'm not pointing at anybody at all, who may curse fate for them leaving the scene of pain just at the time when people were starting to realize the centrality of intellectual property, the value of intellectual property, the value of owning your personality and your face. Ladies and gentlemen, I submit it would be a monumental error to confine our consideration of IP in sports, and IP particularly concerning athletics and their events, athletes rather than their events, to just that consideration. While I admit that the images of Serena Williams, Usain Bolt, Brian Lara, Chris Gayle, the logos of Puma, and Adidas, and Nike, the writings of famous sports journalists, all of those are obvious considerations under this heading. But we often forget that there are patents involved, like what we used to pronounce as patents. Okay? If you consider those of us who were blessed enough to hear the roar of the crowd at Champs, some of you were that blessed. It doesn't matter if it was only to the quarterfinals. I heard it. And you understand the difference between running on what we ran at then at the National Stadium. And if you get the opportunity to just walk in at what now obtains there, you'll understand what technology can do. It involves that. It involves the protection of innovation, of technology, of the design of sportswear. And I'm going to make one other digression. We recently had the new Commissioner of Police address the JCC. And Dr. Kevin, as I like to call him, spent a little time explaining to us the change in uniform that unites us, and explaining the science behind it. So to allow the men and women who wear the uniform to bend quickly, to respond, to run, because the fabric had to stretch, but it had to also be cooled, given the temperatures in which we are involved. So there's a science behind sportswear, sporting equipment, and all of this is protected by IP. Now, WIPO had a very interesting definition, I suppose you could call it, and I quote, IP lies at the heart of the huge commercial opportunities offered by the world of sport. IP rights, especially patents, trademarks, and broadcasting rights, and the legal protection they give, help to secure the economic value of sport. This in turn stimulates the growth of the sports industry, enables sporting organizations to finance high-profile sporting events, and provides the means to protect sports development. Business transactions related to sponsorship, merchandising, broadcasting, and media deals are all built in to this on IP rights. The sports industry has a growing impact on the world economy, creating jobs, investing in public infrastructure, and mobilizing resources, end of quote. Now that's a nice tight encapsulation of the functionality of the sports industry, precisely because of the entertainment, there's that word again, value, which underpins, for example, media rights. Now in the 2012 case before the United States Court of Appeals 11th Circuit, the University of Alabama Board of Trustees had appealed from the decision of Killian J. in the Alabama District Court concerning the alleged trademark infringement by the artist Daniel Moore. The appeals court held that even though the law permitted Moore to have in his paintings images which portrayed players wearing trademarks of the university, that did not permit his use in those reproductions on commercial products for commercial consumption. You see the distinction. Nike found itself in similar territory and did a very interesting backpedal in the case that I'm about to tell you about. Nike filed suit. Now remember, this is Nike. They are the protagonists. Nike filed suit alleging, and this is in, sorry, I should have told you the case, Nike Inc. and Already LLC. So Nike filed suit alleging that two of Already's athletic shoes violated Nike's Air Force One trademark. Already denied the allegations and filed a counterclaim challenging the validity of Nike's Air Force One trademark. While the suit was pending, Nike issued a covenant not to sue, promising not to raise any trademark or unfair competition claims against Already or any affiliated entity based on Already's existing footwear designs or any future Already designs that constituted, and I quote, a colorable imitation of Already's current product. Nike, having filed this covenant to sue now, then moved to dismiss its own claim with prejudice and to dismiss Already's counterclaim without prejudice on the ground that the covenant to sue, not to sue, had extinguished the case or controversy. Nice. Already, of course, had to backpedal quickly or pivot quickly. Already opposed the dismissal of the counterclaim, contending that Nike had not established that its covenant had mooted the case. In support, Already presented an affidavit from its president stating that Already planned to introduce new version of its lines into the market. Affidavits from 3 potential investors asserting that they would not consider investing in Already until Nike's trademark was invalidated. And an affidavit from an Already executive stating that Nike had intimidated retailers into refusing to carry Already shoes. The district court dismissed Already's counterclaim, concluding that there was no longer a justiciable controversy because of the covenant not to sue. The Second Circuit affirmed it, but Already not giving up. It explained that the covenant was essential. Sorry, it explained that the covenant, although broadly drafted, could not cover everything that Already might in the future concede. So it then goes on appeal to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court finds that indeed the case was now moot, that there was no longer a case or controversy for arbitrary purposes, because the issues presented are no longer live or the parties lack a legally cognizable interest in the outcome. Roberts, Chief Justice, in delivering the opinion for a unanimous court, used harsh but felicitous language. And I absolutely must quote this to you. With the kind, he can use felicitous language. The Chief says, if such a shoe exists, the parties have not pointed to it, and there is no evidence that Already has dreamt of it, and we cannot conceive of it. It sits, as far as we can tell, on a shelf between Dorothy's ruby slippers and Perseus's winged sandals. I mean, if I were Already, I'm sure I would crawl into a hole. So, one cannot, of course, discuss IP without mentioning finally the individual's need to protect his or her own rights. That protection must be designed against public interest, against the club, against the national or regional team, against the sponsor, against the professional support, against the management of the athlete, against the media, against the public, and every so often, against the spouse. The ownership of face and the intellectual property that surrounds talent and exploitation of talent is something that is monetized. And the complexity of IP relationships and therefore IP protection is no more evident than in the protection of the image rights of athletes. I mean, in my own practice, it has become habitual for my firm on behalf of the Jamaica Olympic Association, and this predates a certain presidency, just to be clear, to have to send out a warning to advertisers and advertising agencies that when the Olympics rolls around, you're trying to take advantage of athletes by putting out congratulatory messages with their images. Not going to work. Because in the mind of the public, the unsuspecting public may think that you have a relationship with the athlete, and therefore you thereby get the advantage without paying the money. So those of you who see these advertisements coming out, hopefully after the Caribbean strikes a lot of gold, will understand that they ought to have that relationship. So let's now move to the economic implications. We're winding down. You will, of course, recall the staggering figures, trillions and billions of dollars. And our own Professor Banus James in 2007 had done a study entitled The Contribution of Sport to Jamaica's GDP and Employment with a Framework for Sports Policy Formulation. And he worked out and approximated that up to 2.6% of Jamaica's GDP was contributed by the sports sector. The study also noted that at least 44.5 million of direct foreign exchange earnings was generated by 204 elite athletes and their supporting agents. Now, that's 17 years ago, right? And at that time, just to give you a comparison, Forbes was estimating that Usain Bolt alone was earning an estimated US 33 million a year. So take the international context which I painted for you. Take the Caribbean subset below that, remember, about 1%. And then add to that this admixture that I'm telling you about. The earnings of a Bolt, of a Shelley and Fraser Price, of an Elaine Thompson here, of a Chris Gale, of a Johan Blake, a Safa Powell. Think of the impact on Jamaica's GDP. And then if you extrapolate from that, and you shift to the Bahamas, and the potential of a Shawnee Miller-Weaver. If you think of Kirani James, if you think of Brian Charles, and you will realize what it is that we're undercounting and underestimating in our islands. James also said that for every US dollar in capital investment on core sports, the economy gets back 6.18 US dollars. I see my CEO. Would you consider that, Courtney, an excellent return on investment? Yes, sir. So let me give you some concrete possibilities, forgive the contradiction in terms, and start with television rights. Bear in mind that the most lucrative television deal in the world is professional football, and it will generate a combined $10.4 billion, which will be distributed among all of the 20 Premier League clubs. All right? Sorry, pounds. It consists of £5.3 billion for the broadcast of live matches by Sky and BT, and ancillary deals, plus another £5.1 billion from the sale of overseas rights. The latest domestic EPL media rights deal is worth a total of $6.7 billion over a 4-year cycle, beginning with the 2025-2026 season. NBC has just signed a deal to pay $7.65 billion for the rights to broadcast the Olympic Games on television and online until 2032. The contribution of the Premier League clubs to the UK economy grew from $8 billion in 2021-2022, a 1,000% increase from the 1998-1999 season. The league and clubs generated a total tax contribution of £4.2 billion, 2021-2022. 1.7 billion of which was accounted for by Premier League players and staff. Now, whereas I do not believe that our events are yet in that league, no pun intended, it is clear that television companies will pay for content. And the television deal for ISA underscores the maturing of our own local market and the development of our own local sport industry. The Reggae Boys excursion in the 1998 World Cup increased the country's footballing profile. The same has happened in Haiti, as challenged as it is, and in Trinidad and Tobago. So the truth of the matter is that we can produce good content. We have the ingredients. But we have to have a commitment to quality. Because it is the quality of the competition that makes the event TV worthy. Other sporting events in Jamaica, though not nearly at the same scale of the Olympics, can be marketed to attract visitors to our shores, even absent the television rights. And some of those events already attract significant attention. We have the Boys and Girls Champs, which I mentioned previously. There's the Jamaica Invitational, there's the Racers Grand Prix. Premier League has come along very nicely. The 2020 competitions all over the Caribbean are emerging. So there is an opportunity, and if we put it in the context of Manley's contribution, those of you who don't mind admitting, like me, that I was around for the Norman Manley Games, just think of what would have happened had we sustained that. That was long before the Diamond League was even conceptualized. And we had a world record right out here, that epic battle between Walker and Filbert Bailey. Images of which went all over the world at a time when it was not possible to make anything viral. So now we come to consider what one commentator erroneously and irreverently referred to as the lesser sport. And people quarrel about the money that is being put into, for example, netball. But by comparison, look at the bang for the buck that we're getting. And I'll refer to the players later on. Because now I want to segue into the export of services. And when you talk about that area and the economic impact, Jamaica arguably has the two most successful sprint coaches of modern times. Some people may say of all time, in the Honorable Glenn Mills and the Honorable Stephen Francis. And we have, as Jamaicans would say, a bunch of other coaches who are distinguished. There are standout coaches in the Bahamas, in Trinidad and Tobago. Don't forget that these are the coaches who fuel and fund a lot of our youngsters all over the Caribbean when there is no financial backing. And then they may get a scholarship and go elsewhere. And there is no credit given for those who built and laid the foundation. When the coaches are called, it's the name of whoever is in the US or the UK or so. We can and have already started to engage in export of services. People come here to train under Mills and Francis. And we have also exported services. I found it in an interesting fashion. When you consider that Dwight York, I call him the twice exported Caribbean man. Because he first went as a player and then as a coach. We have exported his service. And we have even started to call it export athletes. Kamali Brown, Andrew Fisher, and Harvey in the past have represented different countries. The first two represented the oil-rich Bahrain, and Harvey ran for Turkey. The country. We salute Wes Morgan, Jamaican, who captained the English Premier League champions Leicester City. We have Leon Bailey at Aston Villa. Trinidad and Tobago has Ryan, who plays for the Canadian Premier League club, Pacific FC. And of course, we have Manchester City striker, Miss Khadija Bonishaw, newly crowned Barclays Women's Super League Player of the Season. All these athletes will have an impact on the GDPs of the countries from which they sprung. And now I take you back to netball, because this thing about greater and lesser sport, you have to invest in the so-called lesser sports. We weren't athletic standouts overnight. We got there because of the investment made when it was not popular. And if you look at the Australian situation with Caribbean netballers, where they're already on top this year of their respective games, and consequently atop the statistical leaderboards of the 2024 Suncorp Super Metal Netball League. You have Jamaica Shaniel Fowler-Nemad and Shanice Beckford for West Coast Fever. You have Trinidad and Tobago Samantha Wallace-Joseph for New South Wales Swifts. And you have Jamaican Dromelda Aiken-George, Shamira Sterling-Humphrey, and Latanya Wilson playing for the Adelaide Thunderbirds. All standout performers at the top of their game. And then we have the second generation exports. And this one I find remarkable. I think this is just so Caribbean. The epitome of that pack. Jadon, Malik, Sancho, Sancho, born in London, to a mother from Trinidad and Tobago, and a father of Jamaican and Ghanaian descent. And then, of course, right behind that, you have sports and event tourism. On the private side, you will have athletes and coaches from overseas coming to Jamaica to learn what it is that we do here and paying for the privilege to do so. And on the public side, we have seen the impact of organized public events. In Trinidad and Tobago, for example, the Republic Bank Caribbean Premier League and the massive Women's Caribbean Premier League created a total economic impact of US $55 million during its 2023 season. 15% increase on the total generated in 2022. The International Cricket Council, ICC, is projecting that the 2024 T20 World Cup in the Caribbean will bring over US $300 million to our shores. In the Bahamas, The World Relays in its first year generated 3 times the $10 million invested by the government and has continued to grow. In 2012 and in 2014, the government of Jamaica made a determination to leverage the brand using sporting events as the backdrop. And from that emerged Jamaica House. Projects which were done at the London Olympics, the Rio Olympics, and on a reduced scale at the Moscow IAAF World Games. And just last week, the JOA President Christopher Samuda, someone with whom I am fairly well acquainted, announced that Jamaica House will be at Puma House for the Paris Olympics. So we have athletes, we have coaches coming to the Caribbean shores to train and participate in events. That's sports and events tourism. We have seen athletes such as Wade Vaneker, Daniel Bailey, and others who have traveled to train alongside Usain Bolt and under Glenn Mills. In a small company in which I'm involved, the Sports Innovators Group, we have organized cricket tours for British fans. They come, they play games at Sublime, they get the best of our cuisine, they get to meet some greats. Happy to do it. Because hitherto Sublime was one of those great stadiums which they only saw on television. It's there, ladies and gentlemen. It's right there within our grasp. We have linkages. Because, as I said before, this is not an industry that is unto itself. The creative industries will benefit through design, art, social media. The manufacturing industry through apparel and memorabilia. Food and nutrition, health and wellness. Education and training through a variety of disciplines from coaching, competition. Science and technology, research and development, sports and sports medicine, physiotherapy, psychology, anatomy. These are all areas that we need to develop to underpin this emerging industry. Even agriculture. Can you imagine if we had been quick enough, smart enough to get some yam juice after they thought it was yam that was making all the difference? I can hear people, maybe in the audience and those listening, saying, oh, those figures big. Can't do it. We're too small. That type of reaction, I must tell you personally, just annoys me. The same thing was said when we decided to have CXC exams. Oh, nobody over the world is going to accept these exams. Now, the minute you present it, acceptance. Same thing was said about the law school. Oh, they're going to produce calypso lawyers. Mash down that line. Same thing is still being annoyingly said about the curriculum. Anything we put our minds and resources to. In fact, where there's a lack of resources, we're still internationally competitive. So when you think about all of these things, and you remember that just before, I'm not sure if it was the London Olympics, when Bolt had his injury, he had to dash to Germany for treatment. Can you imagine in the future, if a Usain Bolt has that, and he gets his back cracked back into position in Kingston, Jamaica? What would then happen? Perfectly capable of being done. Consider Bolt's sotto voce and judicious use of influence and its impact on our local film industry. Bolt has required brands wishing to feature him in advertising campaigns to fill those advertisements in Jamaica. You don't make a big scene of that somewhere. His country benefits from the implicit and explicit marketing, the temporary jobs, the local spend, and the knowledge transfer which inevitably takes place. With the expected increases in athletes at the professional level, there will be more opportunities for local sports industries and our Caribbean sportsmen and women. There will be a need for more persons to pursue careers in sports psychology, physical therapy, nutrition, sports management, medicine, and there will be other related disciplines that also benefit. The faculties of sport at UA and UTech are endeavoring to equip us in that regard, and I take my hat off to them. And winding down now, winding down. Just a quick word about sponsorship and endorsement, which is really an appeal to the private sector throughout the Caribbean. Don't wait for the winning. Make the investment at the front end. Someone who will remain nameless will remember that Christopher having said to me, you need to come, this is years ago, to Champs. I wanted to see someone. I went, it was the first time I saw a boat. The Monday morning after Champs, I was outside the office of the person. And I said, you have to see this spinner. You need to get on board with him now. No, we don't do that. A quick word about the pen relays. Ladies and gentlemen, please take this in context. I don't think there are any journalists present, but those of you outside there, please do not misquote me. I read an article, the headline of which was How Does the Pen Relay Carnival Make Money? Written in April this year in the Daily Pennsylvania, which is the University of Pennsylvania's independent student media organization. The authors say in the subheadline, the university's largest event of the year was a multi-pronged approach to generating revenue. In the body of the article, the authors assert, and I quote, if all attendees purchased the cheapest ticket price, the pen relays would generate 2.6 million from ticket sales. In actuality, the true amount garnered from ticket sales will be much more than this estimated amount, unquote. In addition to ticket sales and sponsorships from Chick-fil-A, On, the running shoe company, and Toyota, the relays require that individual athletes and teams pay an entry fee to compete. According to the article, individual athletes must pay $25, while relay teams must pay $50. The authors say, and I quote, at the time of writing, 1,947 individual athletes and 3,365 relay teams are currently set to compete in this year's event. From entry fees alone, the carnival is estimated to generate approximately $216,900 in revenue. Am I the only one who sees something wrong with this picture? Every year, schools in Jamaica and the Caribbean raise funds, beg funds to buy foreign exchange, to go to the pen relays. Schools that certainly in Jamaica struggle annually to supplement the inadequate budget supplied by the government. On top of that, please forgive that forensic language, but on top of that, the attendance is swelled by Jamaican and Caribbean nationals in our diaspora. Yep. So the diaspora is supporting the pens on the ground. And a whole economy has grown up around it. So for example, you have this NGO, which is run by a friend of mine, and is properly registered, tax registered, called Team Jamaica Big. And it's established with the motto, our athletes, our ambassadors. And it provides services not only to students and coaches from Jamaica, but also from Grenada, Guyana, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Trinidad and Tobago. According to the website, approximately 650 participants. And if you think it's only meals that they provide, no. Physical therapy, chiropractic support, mentorship, medical services, ground transportation, shuttle to the stadium, airport transfers, subsidized rates, subsidized airfare, coming out of Caribbean pockets. So this whole ecosystem and economy has grown up around the relays. And according to the website, in 1999, Team Jamaica Big Girl became the first Jamaican organization to be a participating sponsor at the Pen Relays. As a result, the Jamaican flag became the first foreign flag to be flown at the Pen Relays, a distinction unmatched. Now, please, don't get me wrong. Don't misquote. I'm not saying that we should not support the relays. I appreciate the legacy and the history. I've heard that some of the coaches consider the relay as an essential part of their athletes' preparation for more important events. I know that scouts abound and that offers made there can change the trajectory of a young person's life. However, I have for many years thought that we need to at least relook the terms of engagement. Because in pure economic terms, is this not a transfer of wealth from the poor to the wealthy? That apart, the obvious question arises, even while we go there, why not here also? Ladies and gentlemen, I think that we should be examining that need. So, in conclusion, when I delivered the election in 2017, I was able to conclude then in almost exactly the words I will use. So that tells you that we have not made the progress that we should. According to a newspaper report, Dr. Terence Farrell, chairman of the Economic Development Advisory Board in Trinidad and Tobago, highlighted, and this is a quote, sport as one of the industries that could propel the country's economic diversification and assist in transitioning the economy away from its dependence on oil, gas, and petrochemicals. Farrell also stressed the urgency of undertaking such initiatives, noting that demand for hydrocarbons is whittling down worldwide. When I read that, I said that the music industry was perhaps the industry that we needed to look at in parallel in fashioning a response to the diversification of our economies. There is no argument that the potential impact of the sports industry on our Caribbean economies is immense. There is no doubt that sport, properly organized, can have a significant impact, not just on the economic landscape, but on our economic future. Sport can have a remarkably salutary effect as well on the social dysfunction that we're seeing. However, we have to heed something. And what is that something? It is the lessons to be learned from our music industry, which is why I mentioned it. Our music industry in Jamaica, in Trinidad and Tobago, in the Eastern Caribbean. Developed without framework, without legislative underpinning and infrastructure, without significant investment by government and the private sector. In most cases, it's sprung literally from the bowels and pain and passion of ordinary, so-called ordinary people. And in that industry, even though others make more from it than we do, our failure to organize, protect, exploit, or acknowledge competitive advantage in entertainment and in music has made others wealthy and robbed us of significant foreign exchange inflows, significantly more income for our artists, significantly more tax revenue, and significantly more international recognition for our Caribbean civilization. I end as I began with context. Norman Manley then and now is a beacon of excellence, a warrior in the struggle for universal adult suffrage and political independence, a believer in the power of sport to inspire, liberate, and mold a sense of self and a sense of identity. We who are his heirs, particularly we who are his heirs in the law, have a duty to ensure the excellence which our sportsmen and women display on the global stage, on the tracks, courts, and fields of play, is reflected in the excellence of the legal and other facilitating arrangements which are made by us to organize and protect our sports industry. History will not absolve us if we fail to do so. Thank you very much.
Do we have another microphone? Perfect. Yes. Thank you so much. Another round of applause, please. We're going to quickly take 2 questions from the floor.